start sharing.
Oh, of course, yeah. I've allowed you to share screen, mate.
Fantastic. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's nice to be back out in front of people, even if it's on a screen. It's strange times, but I think we're making the best of it, and perhaps we're actually getting more things done now than we would have ever got done before. So as Ben said, if you've not come across him before, my name's Kev. That's a very up-to-date picture in the middle there. Swimming, as I said, there's been my life, from the word go, all the way from learn to swim. I grew up by the coast, spent my life in the sea, spent quite a lot of time as an athlete, trained full-time up to London Olympics as a training partner for, at the time, Britain's fastest athlete. I ran a swim school over 3 sites for 3 years for about 1,000 kids. I also then went into coaching and worked with athletes up to an international level, and then worked in the talent officer role that I've recently left for the last 3.5 years. And as Ben mentioned on the side, I do a little bit of podcasting, and my entrepreneurial work, I should say, is around the areas of innovation. So obviously we're in a very challenging world for the sports world at the moment. So I've been in quite a lot of multi-sport work and outside of sport with just basic innovation, integration of sports tech, raising funds to get sport back up and running, different ways of competitions, all these sorts of things. So lots of exciting things in the pipeline that have hopefully grown off the very challenging last 12 months, but also some opportunities. So I'm going to take you through a few things today, but I think the thing I want to get started with is engaging you, the parents. And I think it can get quite misconstrued when we talk about parent education sessions. I'm not a parent, and I'm not trying to tell you how to parent. I think what I'm going to try and share with you today is my experiences of being on the journey as an athlete, a coach, and then someone completely removed from the situation in my talent role, but also someone who spent quite a lot of time around people who are well outside of most of our sphere. So you spend quite a lot of time around a swimmer called Adam Peaty, who I'm sure a lot of you know, but I've also got to know his extended family, his coaching team, his parents, and actually start to see behind the scenes of what goes on in our journey of an Olympic champion. So I think what I'm going to try and share with you today is some insights. Some of it you might find useful, some of it you'll probably draw a big cross through and never use again. But hopefully, as I said, some of it's useful. But I want to get some stuff from you guys to get started. So I'd be curious as to why kids swim. And obviously, you've all got different kids. They're all at probably different stages in their swimming career. But I would like to get your views on 1 or 2 words or a few words that spring to mind of why your kids actually engage in this sport in the first place. Because it's not easy. It's got some hurdles and challenges along the way. But yeah, the chat box is open, and yeah, if anyone wants to pop some words in there, that would be wonderful. All the swimmers were hanging over the chat box when I asked them a similar question, and then suddenly we got a flood of information. So I'm sure it's going to be the same with you, the parents. Let's have a look who's going to get in there first. Oh, look at that, we're already off. Enjoyment loves it a lot and misses it a lot. Yes, I can empathise with that. Desperate to get back in the pool. It's quite funny, just while you're all filling that in, one of my friends today sent a selfie of them by a pool because they're gearing up their facility to reopen. They actually work there, and it was just quite weird seeing a blue pool with lane ropes in after so long away from it. Struggles around school and academics and confidence in the water. Yeah, you'll find that through sport, and I'll talk about that later around how sport can really lift up other aspects of their life. Fit and have a hobby, loves being in the water, enjoys it, boosts confidence, mentally, physically. And I think coming out of this, we're definitely going to see more of the mental health aspects that swimming can benefit. The structure, the routine, the discipline, the challenge, these kind of things obviously spill over into wider life because they are highly transferable. The friendships, and I said that with the swimmers a couple of weeks ago when we had that talk of, some of the kids on their team will probably be at their wedding, which they all looked at me like I had 3 heads when I said that. But I said, I know it's not on your radar just yet. Oh, look at this. Oh, I love meeting new friends, loves the water. Awesome. Okay, some really good stuff there. And I say, if you want to pop, there's a few more coming in there. As we move through, if there's anything else you want to chuck in there or any questions that pop to your mind, throw them in the chat box. Ben's going to be monitoring it because he's on it, and we'll read them out. But thank you for that so far. That just gives me an idea of kind of, from a parent point of view, what your view of your child's engagement in the sport is. So I'm going to talk about this butterfly effect, and we've probably all heard it in some context, but I'm going to talk about age group swimmers specifically because I think when I spend a lot of time around performance athletes and not just swimmers, this morning I interviewed a Premiership footballer, and we were talking about some of the conversations he had when he was 8 years old. So I think I would change the word swimmers for athletes or young people. It's highly transferable. But understanding that at an age group level, so under the age of probably about 14, they are highly impressionable. And that can be a great thing. It can also be a terrible thing, depending on who's setting the impression. We are laying a foundation. And I think the important thing to get across here is that we don't get stuck in the sport. We get stuck in who they are as humans. And why I say that is because some of the challenges and speed bumps that they have at an age group level actually catapult them on, not just in swimming, but in their future careers. So I've put there about this long game mentality and understanding that a little blip or a challenge at a young age that they actually overcome and they get round becomes a tool set that allows them in 10, 20, 30 years time to do extremely well. And it becomes a blueprint for later life. And I'm going to give some examples of that, not just of swimming, but from other sports and activities that I've come across through the podcast. Okay, so jumping on to the next one, we're going to talk about a typical kid now, learning to swim, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know, most young kids learn to swim in some capacity. And then if they get involved in the competitive side of things, they join a club. They do a few hours a week. And, you know, I've highlighted it there and your parents have reinforced that already. They fall in love with it. You know, for them, it's like, I love this, I enjoy it, you know, whatever it is about it, but they love the sport. And I think this is a thing that jumps out for me because having worked with not just swimmers, but athletes at kind of all levels, but certainly when I get across elite and professional athletes, there's an absolute love for what they do. And that is sown as a seed at a very young age. They don't suddenly get to 20 and realize they love being a swimmer or love being a footballer or love being a pilot. It's something that kind of is sown at quite a young age. So that young picture there looks like a generic young swimmer. That kid that I picked on got to 16 and he suddenly popped through and won nationals and got his hair cut, thankfully. But he had a few hiccups along the way. He went to his first European juniors at the age of 18. His suit ripped. He came 6th. Started bawling his eyes out. Said, I want to stop. This is the end of the world. It's a disaster. And his coach was like, no. We're gonna take this and we're gonna use it. This is just a speed bump in your journey. And the blueprint was laid down with Adam very early on and kind of got to know Mel as coach well over the last kind of 5-6 years. And she spoke in 2016 at a conference that everything we saw him do at the Rio Olympics was actually laid down so many years before that. Some of the abilities he had and the behaviors that he demonstrated to walk into a stadium of 20,000 people and deal with that noise and pressure and, you know, expectation that the whole British public had on him, those skills and attributes were developed very early on. And that's something that I say I've really enjoyed getting to learn how that all worked. One of the things I want to pick up on here is the bond with the coach. And I'm not just talking obviously about an Adam Peaty or someone like that here, but swimmers in general, they will form some form of bond and connection with their coach, whether that's their age group coach, senior coach, whoever it is. But it becomes a cornerstone to their success because most of the time, especially if swimmers are in performance programs, they spend a lot of time with this individual. Okay. They also go through their personal journey with them. So if they've had a bad day at school, it's their coach that's going to hear about it. If there's a problem in their early relationships, as you know, any of you that teenagers have to deal with, we find out about it at the pool. So I think it becomes a consistent part that moves through this journey with them. And I think that's something I've learned working with Adam over the years. That relationship they have is rock solid. And I've watched the heated moments where you see Adam and Mel wanting to strangle each other, but they can push each other's buttons and get that kind of dynamic relationship because they've had years of developing it. And I think it's really important to emphasize that relationship that parents kind of have with a coach can help develop that strength. You know, and a great example I had a few years ago was Mel said to me when Adam was about 14, he was supposed to be doing a kick set, didn't want to wear his fins, got kicked out of the session and, you know, got picked up and got taken home. And Caroline, his mum, said to him, you're not going back to training unless you sit down and apologize to Mel. That is unacceptable behavior and I'm not standing for it. And, you know, typical teenager, grumpy, stiff upper lip, all that sort of stuff. And he went back and he apologized. But Mel said to me that was a turning point for him because at no point did he then have a way out. You know, if he didn't want to swim, that was fine. But if he wanted to strop and throw his weight around, he knew that his mum was going to say exactly what his coach said, you know, behave and do what you're told to do. If you don't want to swim, that's fine. You know, it's your choice. But, you know, if you want to engage with this, we're all on the same side. And I think that's something, again, that I really want to flag because I've seen it at the highest levels. And I promise the difference it makes is incredible. Obviously at 21, we see the end product. And I think that's something with someone like Adam. You know, obviously Ben was there back when Adam was 17 and dropped to 59 at the age group nationals. And we all went, whoa, where's this kid come from? And I think as a wider nation of sport, we all saw the end product at Rio. I was like, wow, this guy's amazing. And it's like, well, actually, he's been around for a little while now. And I think the nice part of being a parent and as a coach is you actually get to see that journey that leads up to that. Yes, the accolades are fun, the medals, you know, the titles, the world records, the MBEs, whatever it is. But actually, it's the journey that's the incredible part. I've talked about this process, and I'm sure Ben's talked about this and the other coaches with you around this process of that is what we focus on, because we can't control the outcome. Okay, if somebody in Adam's race had decided in lane 8 that they were going to go 51 for 100 breaststroke, which I'm sure wouldn't have happened, not legally anyway, that was out of his control. But everything else was in his control in terms of how he trained, how he developed his mind and his body leading up to that point. So it's actually understanding that focus on things you can control through the process can lead to a very positive outcome. It won't always, because that's sport. And in a race of 8 people, only one's going home with a gold medal. Okay, and that's sport. And funnily enough, that works the same in life. If 10 people go for a job, only one person is getting it. You know, 1,000 people apply for a place at university and only 100 people get it. So I think it's important to understand that some of the sporting challenges they come up against actually are going to prepare them for later life. And all those moments that Adam had in the earlier parts of his career meant that when he could stand up in front of the world stage and deliver, it almost was second nature to him. The thing I put at the bottom there is around this only getting started, because again, people see an Olympic gold medal and they think, wow, that's amazing. Okay, yeah, but he's still broken the world record, I think, twice since then, 3 times on the 100 and twice on the 50. And he's still getting better and he's still working on things and developing as a person, especially as a young dad now. You know, he's having to find a whole new sphere of development. And I think, again, those lessons he's had to learn from his swimming journey. So I think it's really easy when we work with age groupers and, you know, whether it's as parents, coaches, developers, we can get hung up in what's going on when they're 12, 13, 14. But I'm talking about a 21-year-old on his sports journey. It's still really getting started, you know, and I work quite closely with Adam now in this new role that I'm doing. And actually looking forwards, he's talking about like doing another 2 Olympic cycles, which is great for us because we get to watch him for another 8 years. But actually that he's going to be in his 30s by that point. And actually that's a really cool experience, I guess, to have, to know that somebody has got so much foresight at the age of, what is he now, in his mid-20s? He's going, yeah, I've still got another 8 years of racing in me. And again, those kind of attitudes and mindsets are laid down at a young age. So I'm going to talk about every journey is different from my experiences, because funnily enough, I didn't go to Olympics. I didn't get a medal, which is very, very sad. But for any of you who weren't on the call last time, I put up this photo and you'll recognize half of it from the introductory photo I showed you earlier. And this was me and another swimmer called James when we were 9 years old, taken back in the 90s, which seems like a very long time ago. And we had a very different journey. We were both good at swimming. We both enjoyed it. But he decided he wanted to commit full time to it, train all these sessions, do all these things. I was kind of like, you know, I'm by the coast. I want to do skateboarding. I want to do surfing, all these other things. So our paths kind of split when we were in our early teens. He ended up going off to Millfield School as a senior and got a scholarship to a university in America, actually in Hawaii. Full paid scholarship, hence some really nice photos there of outdoor swimming and nice beaches. I, on the other hand, went to Hertfordshire, so I think I got the duff end of the deal. But you know, I got some cool experiences, ended up, you know, working alongside some amazing group of people. But we still both work in swimming, ironically. He's now a coach back in England, and I'm still working in the sport in an innovation sense. So I think 2 people can be very close. You know, you have these, I'm sure you all know them, maybe pre-COVID, the sparring group that you young guys and girls have, you know, who's this, who's that on that stroke and that distance. And yeah, they're on the same journey, but actually they're on very different journeys, you know, and I think we need to look often beyond the scoreboard and the sparring groups to worry about where our swimmers are heading. You know, the journey they're going to go on is so much bigger than that. And I think I just wanted to kind of bring that to life a little bit from some of the experiences I had. So it's back over to you again for parents. As a parent, obviously all your roles are going to be different. You know, some of your kids are probably boisterous teenage boys who, if you can get a sentence out of them, that's fantastic. You consider yourself lucky, or maybe not. And then others, you can't get them to shut up. So what is your role as parents? Your interactions with your children on this journey that you've been on so far, where do you see yourself fitting into this swimming escapade that can go on for 10 or 20 years? So yeah, again, sentence or two, just pop it into the chat box. I'd be curious. And I'm expecting some variety here because, as I say, you're all going to be at different places. Okay, support and encourage, taxi. Fantastic. Driver. So the 2 out of the first 3 answers involve being taxi drivers.
I'm surprised I haven't seen chef yet.
I'm sure we will shortly. Yeah. Cheerleader support and encourage, support and encourage. Okay. I mean, let's say keep them coming in, support and encouragement, support them through the journey, taxiing around, soundboarding, alarm clock. Yeah, although that will change once they're 17 and they get a car and you haven't got to drive anymore. As I learned, there was no one to set the alarm for me. Okay, keep them coming in. Something I want to pick up on that's kind of really, I guess, really prominent to the stuff I've come across so far is that there will be a point where we have to let them go. And I don't mean that literally, I mean that, in a metaphorical sense, but whether that's they go off to their first training camp on their own, they go away to their first away meet as a group, they get on the Arena League bus, and you're not going with them. But there's always going to be times when you have to step back. And I think that the thing that I took it from my learn to swim journey when I worked at the swim school. And I always said to parents, they would ask me, how do you know when a kid's ready to swim? And I'd say, I'd put them on a big float and I'd push them out to the middle of the pool and I'll flip them off it, because that's 9 times out of 10 what happens with kids in a fun pool. And I said, if they can get themselves to the side safely without a pair of goggles on and without a woggle on and without, someone cheering them on, that's when I know they're ready. And I often say to young athletes when they're coming through, if I had to take you away on a camp, I took a group away before what should have been the Olympic trials last year up to Loughborough, and they had to do cooking sessions. They had to do self-training sessions before the pool. They had to write their own pool sessions, set their own goals, set their own alarms. And suddenly it was very obvious people that were very much prepared for that situation and people that weren't. I'm just looking at the last few points that have come in there. Verbal punch bag. And that's a really interesting one because we're going to talk about the emotional aspect a bit later. Sharing experiences and back office and encouraging discipline. Yes, obviously links in nicely to my Adam story from earlier. I want to pick up on the emotional thing. And I think this is probably the hardest part as parents, because as a coach, we have an emotional investment as in we want them to do well, but they're not our child. As a swimmer, we want to do well at all costs because, they love it. It's built into them. As parents, we want young people, whatever they're doing, to succeed. And when they don't, it's having the ability to separate the emotion of the short term. They didn't qualify for the county championships, for example, to this is actually an opportunity that's going to allow them in a year to suddenly qualify for the regionals because they had to overcome that hurdle. And I think that's a real challenge, and it's different with everybody in how you motivate your kids, but understanding that there will be so many emotional aspects to this journey. And one of my good mates started training with through to the London Olympics. A year later, he came 4th at the games, and it was horrible. It was absolutely horrendous, and ironically, because of a doping scandal, he might actually end up getting a bronze medal now, 9 years too late, but that's another story. And I remember a year later, him breaking the British record. And I remember walking around the poolside and giving his parents a hug, and they were crying. And he was in like early 20s at that point. And there was so much emotion associated with it. Positive emotion, granted, but swimming is an emotional roller coaster. And the hardest part as parents is to be able to take a breath and say, it's not about what I'm feeling. It's about the child, the young person in front of me. And I did a good talk a few years ago that I invited an Australian coach to, had experiences with, I think, 25 Olympic medalists in swimming, as well as working with the All Blacks, which obviously a completely different sport, but really interesting story. And we were talking about parents, and we said, you work with parents in a different culture. What's it like? What's your one piece of advice to parents? And he said, Kev, okay, I'm going to stop with the Australian accent straight away. But he said, Kev, when they touch the wall, they look around and know that the person sitting in the gallery, mum, dad, guardian, whoever it is, will love them unconditionally based on what came up on the scoreboard. And I was like, that's it. That's it summed up in a sentence of how to kind of separate this emotional journey that you go on as parents. Because very often they might touch the wall when you've driven them to the pool for the last 12 weeks. You've got up every morning, you've fed them, you've packed their bag, you've done all these things for them. You've driven them off to Norwich or Basildon or wherever it is. And then they decide they're going to fall off the block. okay? And they decide that they're going to touch the wall with one hand on breaststroke. And in your head, you think, I want to strangle them. But obviously we can't. So it's actually understanding that the response that parents have at that point can be that ripple effect that I talked about earlier. Okay, and I'll watch this in the best and worst case scenarios. I've seen a child win a competition, but not PB, and get out and cry because their parents had told them that if they didn't PB, you know, not that they didn't love them, but that was how it was insinuated to them that they were a failure if they didn't PB. And it's kind of like, we're on a sports journey as human beings. You know, they're not professional athletes, you know, and probably into their late teens and early 20s, they're not going to be professional athletes. So at this point, like you all alluded to at the start, they absolutely love it. And what do I need to do as a parent? And we often ask ourselves this as coaches, where do I need to maneuver myself so I don't crush that passion of the sport? Because once that's gone, they leave. And that doesn't, okay, you know, we lose a lot of young swimmers who are just not necessarily interested in the sport of swimming. If swimming's not for them, that's fine. But I often wonder, the system of sport, rankings, medals, you know, pressure at a young age, how many swimmers do we lose unnecessarily? Because my argument, especially working with Adam quite closely now, he was doing 2 hours a week when he was 14 because that's all that was available at a tiny local club. He didn't qualify for regionals as a 14 going 15-year-old. And in my head, if he was doing 10, 12, 30 hours a week, wherever he was, and being pushed to qualify for this, and he didn't qualify for regionals, would we have lost him? And in my head, that is a basic model of, we had an Adam Peaty in spite of the system and not because of it. And as sad as it sounds, the conversation I'm having with you right now, and the fact you've got a coach that's willing to work with parents and get you all working together as a unit, that's an exception. I cannot believe how many clubs go, no, we don't talk to the parents. They sit in the gallery or they sit in the car park. They're the taxi and that's it. I don't want to hear from them. No, you guys are the team. And it doesn't matter whether they're 11 or whether they're 25 going for an Olympic title. They need you as a parent, as an emotional support, from a coach point of view, for technical support. But I really want to emphasize that point, because without support of parents on this journey and structured and emotionally controlled support, your swimmers will struggle. Because that's what we're there as parents for. We're there to get them to 18 and then give them a big wave and send them off to the real working world. But actually, the sporting journey they go on, they're going to lean on you a huge amount emotionally, and that is difficult. And I see it a lot. I see the frustration in parents' eyes when they think, oh, I'm tearing my hair out with this. But it's a point that I really want to kind of hammer home. So I'm going to jump forwards a little bit. If I can get my clicker to work. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey in terms of why I still do it, because I've been in swimming, say, I can't remember not being in swimming. But, you know, the same as you've alluded to, I like the fun element. I like the creative element, hence why I've ended up doing what I'm doing now. I like the inspirational aspect. And what I mean by that is when a kid this summer watches the Olympic Games and they see a Michael Phelps style character or a Usain Bolt style character do something incredible, a little glint appears in their eyes of, wow, that would be amazing. I would love to do that. And I love capturing that. I love making them realize that that's possible. A Usain Bolt started in a local running club, and Adam Peaty started in a local swimming club. And understanding that it's a journey to get to that point, and the inspiration you can get from that is huge. This team element I've already spoken about. You know, cops are my go-to example in the East region because they do it very, very well. So I'm kind of preaching to the converted here, but for me, that's a massive aspect of why I still get involved in sport. I love the team. Social aspects, I'm sure with the kids, you can't get them to shut up. You know, you've been out the pool half an hour while you're still in the changing rooms, or because they like chatting and that's what they do. Although the irony is now they're probably on each other's phones next to each other, having a conversation via WhatsApp. The friendship element, I talked about it with the swimmers, and I think this is a big one for me. The bonds they will create with teammates, not rivals, teammates, stay with them for life. And I say this to swimmers when we're at a regional camp and there's 30 clubs represented in a room. I said, you realize in 10 years' time, if you all achieve your goals, you're going to be Team GB, not the kid from Peterborough, the kid from Ipswich, the kid from Hatfield. You're going to be Team GB. If you go away as a region, you're going to be Team East. And the team around you are the ones that get you where you're going. I cannot think of any athlete, not just in swimming, but any sport that I've ever worked with that has got to the higher professional levels without a group of people around them. And a lot of that, their friends stay with them for the rest of their life. So again, really key point to get across there. That's worked for me, but I know works for a lot of other people. And then impact and goals is something for me. I want to be having an impact. That's what drives me. And I like having things to work towards. And whether that's a day-to-day or a week-to-week outcome, I enjoy that process of every day knowing I'm making an impact. So what does it all mean? Well, I've talked earlier on about this, talking about people as young people and not swimmers. And I was very fortunate 4 years ago. I was at a swimming event in Budapest, where if any of you have watched Worlds a few years ago, I was at this amazing pool. If any of you watched the ISL before Christmas, that was also at that same pool. And I got to do a competition there. Really, really cool, amazing group of people. And I met this guy who started a smartwatch app. That's actually gone on to do extremely well, but he was a master swimmer and we were having a chat. And he was sharing this story about how he was going to build his business and do all these cool things. And we kept in touch. And a couple of years later, we connected again. We had a catch up on Skype. And he said, "Hey, man, you should set this up as a podcast." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, we just had a super cool story about the swimming journey and all this stuff." And I was like, "All right, cool." So I had to look into it, ended up setting up this podcast. And the thing that jumped out for me as I looked through it is then I started talking to people away from swimming. So I spoke to a guy who grew up in Southwest London who ended up playing in the NBA. I spoke to the guy who grew up in a not so desirable area of the world and ended up being in charge of the Red Arrows. And suddenly these stories they were telling me, I was like, there's lots of things that are the same. There's lots of traits. There's lots of statements they're making that there was that one moment with their coach or their parent or their teammate when they were young and it set them on a path. And you're thinking, this is incredible because too often we talk about swimming. So we go, I've got a squad of 30 swimmers and 10 of them are going to make it to nationals. Well, every single one of them is going to make it to 18 and be a person in the world, whatever they end up doing. And actually, the traits that they learn at a young age have a massive impact on how effective they are at whatever it is they choose to do. Sometimes it's swimming, sometimes it's something else. And the number of people I interviewed that talked around the parental impact. And again, I came back to it of I cannot believe how many stories I've learned from swimming, but I'm hearing from these other areas and they're exactly the same. It's amazingly inspiring people that just talk about their parents having such an influence on them. So I think it's really important to understand that we are a team, and as coaches, as parents, as volunteers within the club and everyone else, we're taking the swimmers on a journey, but don't underestimate how big that one sentence, word, comment, even look or response to a situation can have such a massive impact, both positively and negatively. And I think that that's something that over the years, I can't remember which athlete it was that I interviewed, but I interviewed somebody who'd gone on and done something pretty darn good at Olympic level. And they said their parents came over after they got their medal and they gave them a hug and said, "I love you." And I think that's a really cool message because actually that would be the response from the swimmer that came 8th, the swimmer that didn't qualify, or the swimmer that's just won gold and broke the world record. And that's it for me. Those moments are absolutely tipping points. And then the final point I've put at the bottom there, adults, we're driven by our why, but our why is very often established in our formative years. And that was something, again, that came out of the podcast. Used the Red Arrows guy as an example. He said, shared an experience that happened when he was 8 years old. Okay, take the guy that I spoke to that played for the LA Lakers. He was talking about how he was at school and one of his friends challenged him to play a bit of basketball. And suddenly it ended up turning into a career. And then you listen to a Michael Phelps or someone like that who was talking about, I was terrified of water, but actually my parents wanted me to swim. I overcame that hurdle and look where it got me. So I think the understanding of this formative years stuff is so crucial, but actually it's so empowering because I say to the coaches when I'm doing big group talks, in your squad of say 100 or 200 kids within your club and your extended network, you've got future members of parliament, you've got future teachers. So ask yourself, if you're influencing a teacher of the future, are you coaching them in a way that's going to turn them into a teacher that you would want to put your kids in front of? And then suddenly the dynamic of things changes quite significantly because we're not talking about now, we're talking about 5, 10, 20 years time. And I think, again, that's really important to get across. And then I just wanted to pick out a couple of stories really from looking at the list. And I'm going to try and pick some different ones for anyone who was on the last call because I know I shared a few stories, but I'm going to pick on Lucy. So I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but in the bottom left-hand side out of the 6 people, there's a girl wearing a red ball hat. and her name is Lucy Charles Barkley. She used to swim. She used to swim in the East region. She's still got quite a few East region records. And Lucy was a good swimmer. Went all the way to London Olympic trials. Was up against Kerry-Anne Payne, who was obviously a very good swimmer. Didn't quite make the cut. But loved the sport and the distance endurance aspect of it, but never quite made it in the sport of swimming. And then she kind of knocked on the door of triathlon. And, for anyone who's into their triathlon and follows her, she's now full-time professional Red Bull athlete. She travels all over the world outside of COVID. She's off to Miami this week to compete. And swimming ended up actually changing her life, but not in a swimming sense, if that makes sense. It's another sport. And she went on and she's doing amazingly and she's having a great time. So I think for me, that was, again, one of these things where what could have been seen as a failure, if you like, you didn't make the Olympics or you didn't win a medal or whatever it was, has actually ended up steering her down a path that's allowed her to generate a career, and she's still got many more years involved in it. So for me, that was just a really nice story specific to the East region that came out of somebody who had a really influential moment in their swimming journey that went on and impacted the rest of their life. So my reflections on the journey, and I had to put that little quote up there because it sticks with me when people talk about my kid didn't qualify for regionals this year. And I go, I know a kid that didn't qualify for regionals as an age grouper and he's gone on and done all right. But just some reflections from me there. The swimming journey really does impact on swimmers, but not just the swimmer. It will impact you as parents and siblings, grandparents, everyone else involved. And there's going to be huge challenges along the way. So expect struggle. It is normal. And it doesn't matter whether you're an Olympic champion or you're going to end up, doing a bit of masters swimming like I do. It is normal to have to overcome these things. The professional role that a coach plays cannot be overstated. And I've put some names up there and you might recognize some of them. If any of you watched The Last Dance last year, the basketball documentary, Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson, they're mentioned in the same breath every time. Adam Peaty, Mel Marshall, Michael Phelps, Bob Bowman, Rebecca Adlington, Bill Finesse. The thing for me was coming out of that is we never talk about the highly successful elite athletes without talking about their coach in the same breath, because they play such a crucial part. And what I also find is because at the age of, say, 18, 19, when they tend to move on and go off to university or do whatever they're going to do, if they choose to pursue swimming, the biggest influential person after that point is going to be the coach. So they've got to get to a point where they trust, believe, and can work with a coach, and their parents support that. Because if they don't, at 17, 18, 19, when they move out and disappear off and fly the nest, they're going to be in the wilderness. The benefits of the butterfly effect and the winning and losing examples that I've mentioned already around whether it goes well or whether it goes badly, trying to be consistent in, love and affection, which sounds ridiculous, but believe me, I've sat in the gallery at regional championships and watched parents swear over the balcony at age groupers. And I think, what are you doing? You are literally writing off the rest of this child's career, because they'll just say, I don't want to go swimming again. And it's again, understanding these little ripple effects can have a long-term impact on them. And I'm sure you guys don't do that. As I say, you've got a very professional structure at the club. Managing the highs and lows of the sport actually end up changing their life. And I've seen it firsthand, not just in swimming, but many sports and wider walks of life. And then this final part, they are young people. They're not professional athletes. And I think it's so easy to get sucked in. Swimming is a really bad sport for it. We have stats and we have rankings and we have qualifying periods and we have gold medals and we have this and we that. And we don't actually celebrate some of the good stuff. Quite a few of you have already mentioned around this discipline, time management, passion, health, fitness. That's hugely valuable. Got 10,000 kids in the East region, every single one of them, that's going to benefit the rest of their life. So just understanding that when we move through this age group journey, we are developing young people and not professional athletes. The pro bit comes later. So hopefully we can all let them find their path. And I'm going to hand over to you for questions.
Right, guys and girls, if any of you have got questions to put forward, what I'd suggest, if you want to put them in the chat first, and then we'll just turn it over to you guys, really. I'll just direct you towards it. So we'll just give you a minute or so.
Do you want to start us off? Then give me something to get the ball rolling so that all the parents have got time to think up some ones that are going to knock me down.
I'm assuming the coach you were talking about was Wayne Goldsmith, right?
Yeah.
So we were really, really fortunate. Wayne Goldsmith is kind of one of the world's leading parent advisors, isn't he, in terms of sport? And really, really fortunate to be in a room on that side. And one of the things that struck out with me with Wayne is that he didn't scare away from encouraging kids to dream, encouraging kids to push themselves out there, but did obviously reiterate what you've already kind of pushed in terms of how you support. What would you say are the top two or three things that you would say are key for support in terms of swimming? We know love and affection is absolutely one. It's a given.
It's the top one. I think giving the freedom to grow, and that might be grow away from the sport, which sounds counterintuitive from somebody in the swimming world, but I've got a lot of friends that I used to swim with that have gone on and done plenty of other sports. You know, if any of you have been involved in the football world for a long time, you may remember a guy called James Beattie, played for England and Southampton. Well, James Beattie was a national age group swimming champion. Eddie Hall, world's strongest man, won national age groups. So I think understanding that we are on a journey, and that journey might lead them out of the sport, and that's okay. But vice versa, they may have moments where they say, I want to drop football, arts, whatever it is they're doing, to focus fully on swimming. And again, that's okay if it's their choice. But I think giving them the freedom to find whatever that is vital, because that's where they're going to head by hook or by crook. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, well, I don't want to sound it in a negative way, but effectively then they become shackled into a shape. You will do this, you must do this. And actually they eventually break it and go and find their own path anyway, but it's then completely without any support. So I think, yeah, the love and affection, the freedom to grow. And I think just the perspective is probably one of the bigger ones for me. I'll share a story that sums it up really well for me. When I was 14, 15, I qualified for a nationals up in Sheffield. Now, I didn't grow up in the East region. I grew up in the Southeast region by the coast. And it's a 5.5 hour drive to Sheffield. And I qualified in the 50 freestyle. I was probably about top 10. They used to have semi-finals back in the day, so I should have made the semi-finals. We went all the way to Sheffield. Dad paid for the hotel, went down to the pool, walked out on Ponds Forge, and suddenly it was the youth and age group champs. So there were some scary big people there. Got up on the block. Was a bit nervous, didn't really go when the gun went off. That was a really long 5.5 hour drive back when I didn't make the semi-finals. And I can quite vividly remember the response from that. I was fiercely disappointed with my performance, but my dad was like, it's on you. If you're enjoying it, then carry on doing it. And if you're not enjoying it, don't carry on doing it. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. And it gave me the freedom to choose. And I drifted in and out of 15, 16. I had a couple of years where I just surfed and floated around the country, just literally surfing, as well as pretending to study at college. And I ended up coming back into the sport at 18. I went to Olympic trials at the age of 25, and I've now turned it into a career that hopefully will span the rest of my life. But that was because I was given the permission to do that. And I think we're always looking for answers. Young people are always looking to be told, do this, do that, do this. But actually kind of going, it's up to you. What would be the best for you? We've got a question coming. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Emma.
Emma, would you like to go for it?
Sure. It was about the best way to navigate the heartbreak from them not being picked for a certain competition or not being selected for the next group to move up, and I think when they're younger, that I certainly, we've struggled with that, trying to navigate that. And then the feelings of they want to give up. And you're like, but it's okay. And you try and do all the things that you've been saying, but that can be quite difficult to navigate.
I think putting it in school language always helps, purely because it's a consistent language that doesn't matter where they're from. So I say to them, did every single kid in year 7, I don't know what exams they do now, but do SATs and all get an A? And they go, of course not, don't be ridiculous. You go, okay. So people are going to develop at different rates. And actually, again, it comes back to this keeping it in perspective. When a kid walks up to me, and it was quite harsh, but actually it kind of brought them back to earth very quickly. I used to coach a youth squad down at Hatfield. And I remember one kid coming up to me at, I think, counties or something, and they were a national level swimmer, and they were crying because whatever it was. And I said, who died? And they were like, no one. I said, all right, I'm glad we cleared that up. Calm down. And I think it's and it's different with all your kids, you know, you've got to know your kids. And as a coach, I knew my kids really well, but I think whatever is going to help them get some perspective on it. Whereas actually, is there aspiration to move up to the next squad and then life stops? Or is there aspiration to do something, you know, in the future, whatever it is? And understanding that the move up to the squad or the qualifying for the next competition or whatever it is a step on that journey. And I think it's really important that if we're on step 1 of 10, that we don't lose sight of that we're on a journey to get to 10. Step 1 isn't the end point. And the really, really nice analogy they use with the British team is getting on the train. And they say you're going to get off at a station, you're going to experience something, and you're going to get back on the train. And it's your choice to get back on the train. And I think that's a really nice way of looking at it, because actually swimming is going to pull in a lot of their other aspects. You know, I had to deal with some really yucky situations when I was coaching. I had a young girl whose dad decided to jump out in front of a train. And that was when she was probably about 14 at that point. And I crossed paths with one of her family. Well, it's pre-COVID, but maybe 2019. And they said, oh, she's in her first year at university and she's swimming with the university team. And I was like, there you go, job done. So I think it's understanding that they're going to have so many challenges. Swimming, yes, they will have some things, moving up, heartbreak of that. They're going to have heartbreak in life, you know, failing an exam, breaking up with somebody, falling out with their friend at school, getting a detention, whatever it is. And I think getting them and supporting them to understand that they are speed humps and not roadblocks is actually a really nice way of doing it. But I wouldn't say it's going to be the same for everybody, because you're all going to have different levels of sensitivity in terms of your kids, but also they are going to be at a different point on their journey. So if they're 99% of the way to whatever their big goal is, and suddenly that last bit feels like the big hurdle, you actually like that you've come this far, you know, you're going to be okay, etc., etc. But then if it's, you know, really early on, you know, you're just getting started, you've still got years of this, there's all these amazing opportunities that are ahead. And using examples like Adam, you know, to say, look, he didn't even qualify for regionals at 15 and at 19 was number 1 in the world. And actually that anything's possible. And it's not saying everyone's going to get to that level, but it's giving them the perspective that they're not alone and it's going to be okay. And to be honest, as a swimming coach, I used to send them to swim down, because you say, go and swim down, 10 minutes, go and have a shower. They come back, they've composed themselves a little bit. The emotional side has calmed down a little bit. The parents' emotions have calmed down a little bit. And suddenly they go, yeah, it was okay. It wasn't great. And you go, well, what was good about it? And you know, I did a really good streamline off the dive. But what wasn't so good about it? Well, it wasn't the qualifying time that I was looking for. Okay, cool. What can we develop? Blah, 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 blah. Right, well, when we get back in the pool, you're going to work on this, this, and this. Immediately, we've taken a negative experience, we've extracted something good from it, which immediately lifts their spirits. And then instead of using the word negative, we talk about development areas that they can work on. Did you sleep great this week? Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, did you eat well this week? Actually, I had a takeaway of one of my friends this week. Right, we're going to make sure we rein that in and work on other stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. I say it's going to be different for all of you, but don't go down the one size fits all approach, because it is going to be different for everybody.
Can I add to that, Kev? Yeah. For the younger parents like yourself, Emma, younger parents of mini squad, development squad parents, we have got some really good experienced parents within the club at the moment. And what I would definitely recommend is, you know, if you're struggling with conversations on that side, definitely approach your squad coach. Obviously, that's not the greatest situation at the moment right now, but once we're back in the pool, that'll be addressed. But the other side is, if you speak to the likes of myself, and I can't offer you the advice that you perhaps want to hear, we've got parents of experience, is Gary on the call right now, with a parent's eye view of what's happened in their journey that could possibly give you some inside information to their conversations in the past. And I often find that parents sharing those conversations help each other a lot more. And one thing we're missing over the last 12 months is having those parent conversations across the balcony. So I
think as well, like it's, and again, I would actually say the parents become a group of supporters, if you like, as you move through the journey. Like Bucks, British Universities, which was February, so just before the lockdown kicked, the first lock before it all started. And I went up there, and, you know, I'm a slightly more relaxed athlete now. Went out for a few beers in the evening, and I went out with Martin Walton's parents, who was an East Region swimmer. Parents are hugely into sport, and Abby Wood's parents, who's come through recently on the swimming circuit. And you suddenly listen to their journey, and if you remove the word ISL or, you know, international team or whatever from it, it's exactly the same. they're talking about all of these challenges they've had to overcome, and that they've supported each other as a group of parents, and on the way they've become good friends. So I think, and I'd say it's going to be different for every single age group and every club you're in, but do seek that out, because at the end of the day in the gallery there's going to be some great supportive people that are going through exactly what you've been through.
Okay, cool.
Got a good question
Anna.
coming from Anna.
Anna, would you like to pose your question, please, mate?
Yeah, I struggle with Rufus, who will, whatever race it is, whether he's done really well in terms of his own personal goal as to what he wanted to get from that race or not, he will tell me it's rubbish. So I see Ben or the coach talk to him afterwards, and if they say something positive, he grows 6 inches and he listens to them. If I say something positive, he goes, it was rubbish. And what you were saying earlier about, I'll say to him, well, what did you think went well, Roo? You know, what did you do? But it's really hard as a parent, because I used to swim, but I haven't got a clue about swimming anymore. So I can't offer any technical advice whatsoever. All I can say is, does it really matter that you didn't get your PB? You swam really well. I thought you looked really good. You know, I don't know how to approach him and get him out of that negativity, which he seems just to say for me. And it drives me demented. A trip home from Cambridge can be from Cambridge to Stamford with, it was rubbish, I didn't do very well, and I didn't do this, and I didn't do that.
I think some of that will come down to obviously knowing your kids, but actually as well, not trying to come up with a swimming solution. I think one of the biggest frustrations that you'll have, especially with teenagers, not lumping them all in the same box, is they could win the national championships and they might still not be happy with that. And they might have the worst race in the world and they're not particularly bothered by it. And actually, it's an adult flaw. And I don't mean that in a nasty way. We all do it. We want to fill the silence. We want to talk about it. And I did this. I can't remember where we were. We did a parent talk somewhere, but I had the parents and the swimmers in the room. And I said to the swimmers, if you have a bad race, what is the one thing you don't want to talk about? And 30 hands shot up and they all went, the race. But we as adults, we want to talk about it because we want to make ourselves feel better and feel like it wasn't our fault and that the swimming world's not falling apart for them. They want a peanut butter sandwich and grab their phone and check what's going on TikTok or whatever it is. So I think understanding that, that's okay. You know, I think if they want to talk to us, sometimes they will. And especially with teenage boys, you're going to be lucky if you're going to get much out of them. But having spent a bit of time around Adam and talking to his parents, his mum was saying, like, and if you haven't watched it, there's a good YouTube video that I put on the regional YouTube page, about 35 minutes long, interviewing her. And she talked about how he developed and grew as a young man, almost more so when he was out of that teenage spat, if that makes sense. And yeah. I think it's just a challenge. I don't envy you guys. You know, my advice of not having teenagers is probably not going to help you. So I think it's just making sure that they understand that there is going to be challenge along the way, letting them do what they need to do. And I don't know if it's not out yet, but I know PT is going to be putting a video on YouTube in the next week or two. And I haven't seen the final edit, so I don't know if it's definitely going to be in there, but he did a really hard training set and he's sitting in an ice bucket whilst getting some feedback from his coach. And he said, oh, Mel, I'm so hard on myself. Like, I set the bar here and I didn't quite hit it. And she said, Ad, my job is to make sure sometimes you smash it out the park and sometimes the set smashes you. So that understanding that it's not going to be easy all the time, because if it is, you're eventually going to get to the point. And if you've got any young kids in the background, put their fingers in their ears, Father Christmas syndrome. That is what happens with young swimmers that get better and taller and stronger on a nice linear line. At some point, it doesn't work out like that. And I listened to a really good interview of Chris Hoy talking about that. And he said, I was working with a psychologist 3 weeks before the Olympics in 2004. The psych said to me, what happens if someone breaks the world record in the first person of your heat? And he said he got to the Olympic Games and in the final, the first person to go broke the world record. And he had won, oh, well, what happens if that happens? I've got to deal with it. So I think it's going to be different depending on the context, obviously. But when you're on this journey with the kids, they're going to have these moments and get them to understand they are part of it. But also, if they want to talk about it and rant about it, that's okay. Because in an hour, they've probably forgotten about it because they're, say, on their phones or on their Xboxes or whatever else. So it's navigating what is a very challenging time for kids. Ben, I'm going to send you a book that you can post on the Peterborough Facebook group, Understanding the Teenage Brain. And I read it and was like, it blew my head off. I was like, this is really interesting because there's actually some science behind, you know, the mood swings and all this other stuff. But it was the first time I'd had it kind of put verbally to me in a way that I could grasp. And I would say I haven't even got kids. So I'll send that across because that was quite a cool resource that I've read. And it's not sports specific. It's just understanding especially teenage boys, when they really start having their moments, you go, it's just normal. It's who they are. And if they're having a paddy, they'll have to deal with it.
Thank you. That's really useful. Thanks.
Okay, Hannah. Can't see on the call right now. Yeah, I see you. Right.
I'm here. Yeah, so this really is just about kind of the parent self-regulation between being the driver for the discipline. So the early morning start, for example, when the light goes off at night, do I really have to get up? Could we not do it on Wednesday instead of Monday? And I really struggle with being the kind of the driver or the motivator versus allowing the child to be the driver of their own destiny, knowing full well that actually they've got what it takes. Part of this journey is instilling the discipline. How do you get that best balance, like without kind of feeling yourself like you are the pushy parent?
I think there's a few things, and I'm sure this will resonate with all parents out there. Correct me if I'm wrong, I've never found a young swimmer that skips out of bed in the morning. And if training is at 6 a.m. or whatever it is, training's at 6 a.m. And if that happens to be on a day when they don't want to get up, if they've chosen to commit to swimming or be part of a squad or whatever the expectation is, we're going to have to, you know, occasionally they're going to have to throw us a bone, but most of the time it's going to be us doing that. But I think one of the things that you'll find as they get a bit older, and I say this, okay, here's a wonderful story that kind of highlights that. I went to, I think it was a phase 3 camp. So like England used to be split up, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And they went on the Broad event. And they got to the airport and one of the swimmers turned up with a suitcase that could have fitted, you know, 6 people's luggage in. And they got to the hotel, I think it was in France, and the lift was broken. And they turned around and looked at the coach, and the coach went, nope, that's on you. And that was, for me, that was a great metaphor. At some point, that's going to happen. You know, go to university. Like I was used to swim 5 hours a week. We didn't have any mornings other than Saturday, which started at 7:30. So I grew up in a really fortunate situation. When I moved to Hatfield, I was 21. I was a fresher at university, and 4 mornings a week, my training started at 5:15. Now you can imagine those two lifestyles don't kind of gel together too well. But the discipline of it's your choice to get up was something that kind of gradually got built into me over the years. I can assure you, even at 16, I didn't hop out of bed on a Saturday morning excited about going training. But I understood if I wanted to go to counties, regionals, nationals, swim in the Arena League, whatever it is, that was a necessary process to go through. And actually, you probably wouldn't say it to young kids, but understanding that for them, if they can't get their head around getting up 1 or 2 mornings a week to go training, when they go to work and they've got a half an hour commute and their working day starts at 7:30 and suddenly they've got to get up at 6:30 and they're dragging their heels because they've always been driven out of bed, if you like. I think it's kind of laying the seeds for that. But it's a challenge. And at this time of year is the worst. And thankfully, we've got COVID at the moment. So there's no morning training or no early morning training. But I think it is something that's laying down a foundation for the future years, but also educating them on why they're getting up in the morning. Because if they're saying, I love swimming, I want to do this, I want to do that, we need to understand that that is a part of the journey to get to that. And as long as they understand that, you kind of got a bit of a middle ground. They know they don't particularly want to do it, but that's where they want to get to. And it depends what their aspirations are. But if I've got kids that are looking for, you know, big goals, I say to them, the ultimate hallmark of a champion, whether it's an NBA player, an Olympic gold medalist, a fighter pilot, when they are presented with the tough decision, they make the right decision, whether they want to do it or not. And I think that's probably the hallmark that I see in young swimmers. It's very easy to make a wrong decision or a right decision, depending on where their head's at. So I've watched swimmers who have got all the way to a national championships, for example, lost a race in the final that they should have won, and then leant over the lane rope and given a teammate a handshake because it was the right thing to do. They probably didn't want to, But actually, they made a conscious decision in that moment to do that. And they got out and said thank you to their coach. And at the age of 17, they kind of stomped back to their room a little bit, but said, thanks, mum and dad, for bringing me up to Sheffield and spending £5 million on a hotel room for the week. But it's such a challenge for parents to kind of find the line. It's going to be different for everybody. And the 13-year-old is almost like Jekyll and Hyde. You know, the disciplinary line you might need on Monday is different to Tuesday, is different to Wednesday. But you are sowing the seeds for future success, not just in swimming, but obviously in their careers. I hope that helps a little bit.
I'd like to add to that, Kev. I'd like to think of it. It's one that regularly comes up with parents when their children are going 12, 13, 14, 15 and starting to increase their commitment. Instead of enforcing the discipline side, it's redirecting the responsibility. So one of the pieces of advice I always offer is, if they're struggling to get out of bed and they're trying to say, well, you know, is it okay if I put it back to this day? Put the responsibility on them to contact the coaching staff that they're not going to make it. So that's fine. You email Ben and say that you're not going to come in on Monday morning, or you know, if, as you know, whoever the squad coach is, and get them to place that responsibility. And 99% of the time, it creates the habit of, okay, I've got a choice now. I either make this call and contact the coach, or I actually turn up. And it's redirecting the responsibility on them, where they're trying to put the responsibility on you to avoid that session.
Yeah, ownership. That's what we're talking about. It's ownership.
That works, by the way. Both of them.
And I'm obviously, we're bang on 7 o'clock, and I'm conscious we've had an hour on call, but I'm more than happy to take more of Kev's time if you want it. Is there anybody else with a question before we let him free?
Something I would throw out to all the parents is that no one call, no one discussion, no one person is going to give you all the answers. And the second you think you've cracked it, they'll throw you a curveball. You know, I remember, you know, having to deal with an injury at 22, and that was like, we'd never had to deal with an injury on the swimming journey before. And suddenly my coach and parents were like, how are we going to deal with Kev? Because he's never had to deal with this before. So I think you're always going to have a level of uncertainty, and it's okay. You know, none of us know what we're doing. We're all kind of making it up as we go along. That's life. But I think that the biggest tip I can have is making use of the systems that exist. You know, when I was an age grouper, Facebook didn't exist. My parents sat in a committee meeting and said, how do we enter Kev into nationals? In the old days, we had to do it by post. And they said, find out yourself, because when we were age group parents, we had to find it out ourselves. And that was my experience of committees when I was a teenager. So I think we're in a very different situation now, where you can go out and tweet Caroline Peaty. You can post on the Peterborough Facebook group and say, hey, coach, anyone got any tips on this? It's that sort of thing that hopefully is going to make it a lot easier, but please use it, because we're in a more connected world than ever. Sometimes it's extremely frustrating, but in some areas, it's obviously going to have some real benefits for us. So make use of the various digital platforms that are out there, and you should hopefully always find an answer somewhere.
If you do want links to experienced parents, I'm more than happy to guide you towards one or two of the parents. I'll just send you all to Gary.
Gary's a
Kev,
okay.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate what you've offered, and I'm sure parents, I certainly took a couple of things away from that, so I hope the parents did. And awesome. Parents, thank you for your time.
Thanks everyone. It's if you follow the podcast and you have a watch of it this summer, when you did a Kerry Ann Payne interview going out asking what it's like being an Olympic medalist and then being a parent, that's what I'm going to record next. So it's good fun.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Really are. But, thanks for your time, everyone.
Yes.